Why do you switch to spicy?
Ah, good point. I don't know. Yeah, it's.
Who's that?
That wasn't the beginning of the
Okay.
of the interview, by the way. That's somewhere half in the middle. The reason I've chosen that is, as you know, Abbas favorite in mathematics is, and then I asked him, can you give me an example of what that is, basically. So what he's done there, he said the concept of power. There is a term that we need to learn, by the way, the term tavan. Tavan means power in mathematics, in Farsi. So 2 to the tavan of 5. That's 2 to the power of 5. As he said tavan in Farsi, my favorite topics in mathematics is tavan. Is that the gestural representation for tavan? But however, you can't see it there properly. But in the transcripts it's seen. He makes this sort of connotation of that, which to me that refers to the position of power. Power basically. That's how mathematically it's written to diagonal to the top right hand corner. So we got 5 to the power of x basically. But my question was not only why he triggered it, but also the gestural representation for tavan is like that in Farsi, and why is it that it is like that in English, basically? Is it pointing in English? Is it pointing to the position of power? But in Farsi, is it some sort of metaphorical gesture of power? So he wasn't clear at the time. He wasn't really clear about whether the concept can generate 2 different gestures based on the same mathematical context, but the same bilingual learners. So is that an effect of the influence of languages? I didn't know. Again, there were all speculations at this time for me. Well, what I realized that, oh, but that's a better picture of power, basically. So, to the power of. I had no idea of what his mental representations of that was. And again, I can tell where the attention was to, but I couldn't tell where the intention was. Intention was on his hand, but the intention was God's. I don't know. I couldn't get into his. But however, I decided if I create a context in which is verbal, vocal, and visual represented, if I could take a package and encounter all these cues and signals, maybe I could try to get to what he was thinking as he said it. So one of my first steps was to try to look at the term for power. In Farsi, there are 2 terms for power. Power can be used in terms of power and strength. I'm pretty strong and I go to gym 5 times a week because I'm powerful. So power is used in that sense. Also is used as a mathematics register as well. That's a specific terminology that's used in mathematics. However, in English language you can use powers in different social contexts. The meaning of power that is used in English is abstract because there isn't a direct correspondence of power to being strong and strength, because we can use it in terms of power cuts, political power, power and strength, and mathematical power. So the meaning here is abstract, whereas there is a direct correspondent of the term power in Farsi. And again, most of these kids, they came across the vernacular power before they learned the mathematical one. Okay, that would have been the first exposure in the society before they came across the concept of power at the age of 11, 12 probably. However, that was just one suggestion. I thought maybe I should look for it. I've been really lucky to have her as Carol, who said that the upper arm is an account of a notion of strong and strength. A lot of bodybuilders do, yeah. And again, I think that could be cross-cultural as well, but so it's a notion of being strength in an Iranian context. Touching the upper arm is representative power. The world is in my hands, basically. That sort of connotation you get. But again, what could lead to generate different gestures for the same mathematical concept by the same speaker in two different languages. I found that more interesting than code switching and what counts code switching, what triggers code switching. So Tarakita, it says words and constructions that are available commonly used in a given language shape the way speaker recognizes the information. Each language has different syntax and semantic resources, basically. Could it be that could it be the abstract meaning of the term power in English could generate no meaning, but however the direct correspondence of the term tavan in Farsi generate that sort of gesture. I needed more example, but what I thought that the guy has done, this specific student, was he tried to use a vernacular meaning in a mathematical meaning. He tried to use the term that is used in social context to convey mathematical meaning. This example, I think, is a great example. Find x. Here it is. It makes sense for us. It makes laugh because we're interpreting the term find in its non-mathematical way, because its mathematical way is telling us find the quantitative nature of x, whereas we're looking at there it is with a loose degree of finger closure. There it is. So was that the similar thing that happened with that student? I don't know. You have questions?
Just a reflection that this expression to the power is in Swedish, if translated, elevated to.
Yeah. My niece does it
X,
when she talks about it. Yeah.
X to the power 2 is in Swedish.
Yeah,
elevated.
Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me. Yeah, exactly. I have a 19-year-old niece who was born and bred in Swedish, and her uncle can have some help with my mathematics. Every time she talks about power, and again I talk about an interviewing technique in a second, every time I perform that on her, she does this. She goes up. So yes, indeed. And again, we're going back to the Sotaro's Kitas, that words and constructions that are available or given in a language shapes the way speaker organize information for speaking. But however, at this specific time, I had one example, and I couldn't really speculate, generalize information beyond that. So what did I decide to do? I think I had about 16 hours of video recording in that complementary school. They've been all transcribed, and I looked for, when you search Control and F to look for a specific term, I searched for tavan or power. And only one instance came where the classroom teacher, he's describing the concept of powers in English. It was to do with the speed of light, I think, or the speed of sound, I can't exactly remember. But when he draws up on like 10 to the power of 7, 10 to the power of 6, and this is what he says. So 10 to the power of, that's his gestural representation. So as he was saying, 10 to the something, that was a gesture he made. That was the medium of English. That gesture, the diagonal sort of up to the right-hand side, that's where the mathematical notation of it is. Has the mathematical notation influenced the gesture for that specific context? Maybe, because I'm getting two results now. Maybe I'm getting two same gesture representation of that topic. But however, that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough to try to speculate whether different languages activate different understanding and generate different gestures. So what I decided to do was to set up a structured interview with the classroom teacher. I rang him up saying that I would like to make an interview, but however, I couldn't be telling him, look, this is an idea I've got that when people talk in Farsi about tavan, they do like this, and when they talk in English, they do like this. So how would you do it? That's not the question I could have asked him, because that would have ruined the whole process. I decided to ask him specific about, so let's say when you go to the classroom next week, how do you prepare for a concept of indices or powers, for example? Okay? So he could have said whatever. The trick to that was to repeat the same question 3 or more times. And that was the case actually. So the first time we asked him, so tomorrow, when you go to the lesson, for example, how would you prepare for the concept of Tavans, for example, Paris? Oh yes, when I go there, I'll prepare something from the books, photocopy it, and if it's necessary, I'll teach it in Farsi and English. Okay. Imagine tomorrow you're going to your lesson. How would you prepare for the concept of power or Taban? That was his suggestion. Tomorrow, for example, if I'm talking about the concept of, let's say, Taban, for those who can't speak Farsi well, I use Taban, and for those who need English, I help them out and I'll prepare my lesson, basically. So in a sense, he tried to draw on his semiotic resources to convey his message. He would have thought that what he said in the first time wasn't rich enough to convey his message. However, my trick was again, tomorrow or next week, for example, how would you teach the concept of Taban or power to those students? If they're communicative competence in English, then power wouldn't be a problem to them. Whereas for Taban, it's a different concept. Taban, for those who were born in the UK, probably wouldn't know what Taban is, for example, and I would use textbooks to convey Taban or power. So that was a trick. We'll see the video now. That's a gestural representation of the term Taban. Again, let's look at it now. Let's look at it. Again, he mentioned he mentioned the gesture representation for Taban and gesture in Taban and Farsi. He mentioned Taban and power within that 12 minutes of clip several times. So that's one clip where he goes like that with proper attention.
من یادم میاد که اولین کلمه‌ای که معلم به ما گفت با توان اسم ارقام شما قوه بود.
Let's look at it again. Let's look at his
من یادم میاد که اولین کلمه‌ای که معلم به ما گفت با توان اسم ارقام شما قوه بود.
Can we see the tense? Okay. However, this is not identical to that, but they were along the same lines. Okay. To me, that is a concept of power. That is a concept of power in a sense as well. They're very similar in essence. It's like if someone says ear or ear, they're exactly the same to me. They're both ears but in different formats. Now I found it interesting. We could analyze his language, but I think I've said it more or less all. There has been an intonation. I remember the first time my teacher taught us the concept of Taban. So there's been a slight raise in his intonation, and followed by his French-based as a concept, and as it was talking about the mathematical concept. Okay, surprisingly, not only the student but the teacher thought along this concept, mathematical concept, in its vernacular way. The next one, I particularly like this video clip because it performs the gestural representation for the Taban and power in the same sentence. And again, the question I think he asked me was, how would you do, which language would you use, basically? And he said he would use the language that would serve the purpose to those who are English as an additional language or who are non-Farsi native speakers. Let's look at the video.
من رو فارسی بهشون توضیح میدم بعد بهشون میگم که منظورمون مثلا از توان چیه که مثلا to the power of something. من رو فارسی بهشون توضیح میدم بعد بهشون میگم که منظورمون مثلا از توان چیه که مثلا to the power of something.
What does this mean?
Did he do that? Let me just check.
من رو فارسی بهشون توضیح میدم بعد بهشون میگم که منظورمون مثلا از توان چیه که مثلا to the power of something.
I don't know, well, I was interested, in power, So, that leads to one question. I think I had enough evidence to gather up about where does the vernacular concept activate the mathematical understanding or the concept of Taiwan? And to me, it's yes. To me, it seems like the social vernacular of Taiwan activated the mathematical understanding in mathematical context. However, when power was used, when the English language was used, that refers to the position of it. So in a sense, there is a mathematical understanding there because that indexes the power of it, like a chair. That doesn't make sense to me. Okay, power. But to me, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't it? Every day has taken meaning over the mathematical one. Not surprisingly enough, that shows a cross-linguistic variation of the mathematical power, which is reflected through gestures. But what do gestures reflect? Okay, I'm here to explain a possible explanation that could reveal not what the attention was onto, but what the intention was, what the internal intention was, or what he could be thinking about, or what the student could be thinking about. My claim would be, again, I have to be very cautious about giving this claim, that the social vernacular of the term Taiwan activated the mathematical understanding for the confidence for its mathematical meaning in the mathematics classroom when the language was used in Farsi. However, when English was used, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case because the term Taiwan has such a strong metaphorical meaning behind it that activated its meaning. And again, obviously, the gestural representation of the mathematical concept power varies between speakers of different languages because the lexical and syntactic resources of language vary. Okay, and that doesn't surprise me when a Swedish person would say power, they would go like that. That's an example of how the resources of a language can activate an understanding of it. But however, that sort of gesture in Swedish would refer to the raised position of the power, it could be, rather than to its actual vernacular meaning. And again, the ways in which the concept is what surprises me is that not only the students' use of Taiwan, but the teachers' use of Taiwan led to a mismatch between the actual mathematical meaning of it and the social vernacular of it. But when the speaker uses uses English talking about the same concept, there is a gesture speech match. So my question to conclude the seminar would be: is mathematics neutral in discourse? Does mathematics convey different meaning in different languages? Okay? If Swedish does that, if Farsi does that, and if English does that, refers to notation, all talking about the same concept, maybe in the same multilingual community, school, would different languages be neutral in discourse? Okay, I hope that's a reflection of how different languages could activate, could not be. I think language is not neutral in discourse, basically.